Imagine you're an ancient scholar, dusty scrolls in hand, stepping into a vast hall where the world's knowledge whispers from every shelf. But in a flash of fire, it's all gone lost forever. What secrets vanished with the Library of Alexandria? Let's uncover the untold story. Chapter 1. The Dawn of the World's Greatest. Library, picture this. It's the 3rd century BCE. And Alexandria, Egypt, is buzzing as a hub of culture under Ptolemy I, successor to Alexander the Great. He dreamed big, not just conquering lands, but collecting minds. So he founded the Library of Alexandria as part of the Musama Temple, to the Muses, where thinkers could gather, debate, and innovate. It wasn't just a building, it was a revolution in knowledge preservation. At its core, the library aimed to house every book ever written. Ptolemy's agents scoured the Mediterranean, buying, borrowing, or even confiscating scrolls from ships docking in the harbor. They'd copy them and return fakes if needed. Talk about dedication. By Ptolemy II's reign, it ballooned to hundreds of thousands of scrolls, covering math, astronomy, poetry, and medicine. For example, Euclid penned his Elements here, laying foundations for geometry we still use today. Scholars like Eratosthenes, who calculated Earth's circumference with astonishing accuracy using just shadows and math, thrived in this environment. It was a melting pot. Greeks, Egyptians, Jews, and others collaborating. Translating works from Persian and Indian sources too, this golden era set the stage for unparalleled intellectual growth. But as we'll see, glory often invites envy and destruction. Stay tuned for how the library became a treasure trove of ancient wisdom in Chapter 2. Chapter 2. A beacon of knowledge in a turbulent world. Let's dive into the Library of Alexandria at its peak. A shining star in a world often clouded by chaos. By the 2nd century BCE, this wasn't just a collection of scrolls, it was the beating heart of intellectual life. Imagine a place where the brightest minds gathered, not to fight over land or gold, but over ideas, theories, and discoveries that shaped history. The library's brilliance lay in its diversity. Scholars didn't just read, they experimented, argued, and built on each other's work. Take Aristophanes, a physician who revolutionized medicine by studying human anatomy up close, something taboo elsewhere. His findings on the brain and nervous system were centuries ahead of their time. Or consider Aristarchus, who dared to suggest the Earth orbited the Sun long before Copernicus. These weren't just books on shelves. They were living ideas debated in bustling halls, where Greek philosophers rubbed shoulders with Egyptian priests and Indian mathematicians. What made it special? The library's system. Scrolls were meticulously cataloged in the Pinax, a massive bibliography created by Callimachus, organizing knowledge by subject and author. This wasn't just hoarding texts. It was making them accessible, a radical idea then. Ships arriving in Alexandria had their books copied, spreading knowledge from distant lands like Babylon and Ethiopia. It said the library held translations of sacred texts, like the Hebrew Septuagint, bridging cultures in ways we can barely imagine today. But this brilliance attracted attention, and not always the good kind. As empires shifted and power changed hands, the library's wealth of knowledge became a target. In the next chapter, we'll explore how political storms began to threaten this sanctuary of wisdom. Chapter 3. Shadows of Power and the First Cracks. The Library of Alexandria stood as a symbol of human curiosity. But even the brightest lights cast shadows. By the 1st century BCE, the world around it was growing restless. Egypt, once a mighty Ptolemaic kingdom, was caught in the crosshairs of Rome's rising empire and internal strife. The library, with its vast collection and prestige, wasn't just a scholar's haven, it was a political pawn in a dangerous game. Rulers began to see the library's knowledge as power. Ptolemy VIII, for instance, expelled many scholars in a fit of paranoia, fearing their influence. This wasn't just a tantrum. Scattered brilliant minds, weakening the library's intellectual core. Meanwhile, Rome's shadow loomed larger. When Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria in 48 BCE, chasing his rival Pompey, he didn't plan to target the library. But war is messy. During a naval skirmish in the harbor, fires set to enemy ships spread. Some sources claim part of the library's collection burned. Exact details are murky. Ancient accounts like Plutarch's mention the fire but disagree on the damage. Was it a wing of the library? Warehouses of scrolls? We may never know the full toll. What's clear is the library didn't vanish overnight. It still stood, but the cracks were showing. Scholars kept working, yet the atmosphere was tense. Funding dwindled as Egypt's rulers juggled political survival. The library's role as a neutral ground for ideas was eroding, caught in the tug-of-war between fading Ptolemaic glory and Rome's iron grip. The stage was set for bigger threats. In the next chapter, we'll uncover how religious and cultural shifts began to challenge the library's very existence. Chapter 4. The Clash of Beliefs and the Library's Struggle. The Library of Alexandria, once a sanctuary for all ideas, faced new challenges as the world around it changed. By the late 1st century CE, the rise of new religions and shifting cultural tides began to test its open-minded spirit. Alexandria was no longer just a hub of Greek and Egyptian thought. It was a melting pot where early Christianity, Judaism, and traditional pagan beliefs collided, often with sparks. The library, with its vast collection of texts from every corner of the known world, included works that didn't always sit well with emerging powers. Early Christian leaders, for example, saw some pagan scrolls full of Greek philosophy or Egyptian mysticism as threats to their growing faith. Meanwhile, Roman emperors, now ruling Egypt, cared more about control than curiosity. The library's inclusive nature, once its strength, started to look like a liability. A famous story involves Hypatia. It's a brilliant mathematician and philosopher who taught in Alexandria around 400 CE. She championed reason and science, but her pagan beliefs put her at odds with fanatical factions. Her tragic murder by a mob for 15 CE wasn't a direct attack on the library, but it signaled a growing hostility toward its free-thinking ethos. Resources were another problem. Maintaining thousands of papyrus scrolls prone to rot and where required money and effort. As Roman priorities shifted to military campaigns and political dramas, funding dried up. Scholars still worked, but the library's glory was fading. Its halls quieter. It was caught in a world that increasingly valued dogma over debate. The storm was far from over. In the next chapter, we'll explore how invasions and neglect pushed the library closer to its breaking point. Chapter 5. Invasions and the fading flame. The Library of Alexandria, already battered by political and cultural shifts, faced a new wave of threats as the world grew more unstable. The 3rd and 4th centuries CE, the Roman Empire was fraying, and Alexandria felt the tremors. Invasions, rebellions, and neglect began to erode the library's foundation, turning its once vibrant halls into a shadow of their former glory. One major blow came in 272 CE. When the Roman Emperor Aurelian crushed a rebellion led by Queen Zenobia of Palmyra. Her forces had briefly seized Alexandria, and in the chaos of retaking the city, parts of the Musam complex, including areas tied to the library, were damaged. Ancient sources are vague, some hint at destruction, others at looting, but the fighting left scars. Scrolls already fragile were lost to fire, theft, or simply abandonment. The library wasn't razed, but its resources dwindled further. Maintaining a vast collection required constant care, copying decaying papyri, training scribes, and guarding the halls. With Rome distracted by its own crises like barbarian invasions and economic collapse, Alexandria's needs fell off the priority list. Local unrest didn't help. Riots between religious factions, Christians, pagans, and Jews tore through the city. And the library, a symbol of old pagan learning, was an easy target for zealots. By this time, smaller daughter libraries like the Serapeum were housing some of the collection, but even these faced attacks. The library was still standing, but its spirit was fading fast. Caught in a world that seemed to care less about its treasures, the end was drawing closer. In the next chapter, we'll dive into the myths and truths surrounding the library's final days. Chapter 6. Myths of Destruction and the Final Blow. Library of Alexandria. Now a flickering beacon in a turbulent world, is surrounded by legends of its demise. By the late 4th century CE, stories of catastrophic destruction began to swirl, but separating fact from fiction is tricky. The library's end wasn't a single dramatic moment, but a slow bleed. It's punctuated by events that fueled enduring myths. One famous tale points to the Roman Emperor Theodosius, the first in 391 CE. He ordered the destruction of pagan temples across the empire, including Alexandria's Serapeum, a temple that housed part of the library's collection. Christian zealots, eager to erase pagan influence, reportedly tore it down. Some accounts, like those from later historians, suggest scrolls were burned or scattered. But was this the end? Probably not. Evidence indicates the main library, tied to the Musam, had already been declining for centuries. The Serapeum's fall was more symbolic than total, though it chipped away at what remained. Another myth blames Arab conquerors in 642 CE, when Muslim forces took Alexandria. A story likely apocryphal claims Caliph Omar ordered the library's books burned, saying they were either redundant or heretical. Yet contemporary records don't support this, and by then the library was likely a husk of its former self. These stories, though gripping, often served later agendas, painting villains to suit political or religious narratives. What's certain is that centuries of neglect, looting, and conflict left the library in ruins. Scrolls, if not destroyed, were scattered or decayed. The dream of a universal knowledge hub was gone. In the next chapter, we'll explore what treasures might have been lost in this slow collapse. Chapter 7. The Lost Treasures of a Vanished World. The Library of Alexandria's slow demise left a void that echoes through history, not just for its physical loss, but for the priceless knowledge it held. Imagine walking through its halls, shelves, stacked with scrolls containing ideas, stories, and discoveries we can only guess at today. As the library faded, so did countless works that might have reshaped our understanding of the ancient world. Let's explore what was lost, why it matters, and how those losses still haunt us. The library's collection, with staggering estimates suggest it held between 400,000 to 700,000 scrolls at its peak. These weren't just books as we know them. A single scroll might contain a poem, a mathematical proof, or a medical treatise, works by giants like Sophocles, whose 120 plays dwindled to just 7 surviving today, likely filled those shelves. Imagine entire tragedies, full of human struggle and wisdom, reduced to dust. Or consider Aristarchus, who proposed a heliocentric universe 1,800 years before Galileo. His full calculations could have been there, offering insights we'll never recover. Scientific texts, like those by K. Eusebius, the father of pneumatics, who built water clocks and early machines, might have detailed inventions centuries ahead of their time. Even translations of non-Greek works, Persian histories, Indian mathematical treatises, or Egyptian astronomical records were likely stored, blending knowledge from across cultures. Why does this loss sting? These texts weren't just academic curiosities, they were practical tools. For example, ancient doctors like Aristophanes, who dissected human bodies to understand anatomy, wrote detailed guides that could have advanced medicine if preserved. Instead, medieval scholars often started from scratch, piecing together fragments of Greek and Roman knowledge. The library's catalog, the Pinax, was itself a masterpiece, a guide to organizing knowledge that predated modern library systems. Losing it meant losing a roadmap to human thought. Some fragments survived, copied by scribes in places like Constantinople or Baghdad, but most didn't. Papyrus was fragile, vulnerable to humidity, fire, or neglect, without the library's resources. To maintain them, scrolls crumbled. Later libraries, like those in the Islamic Golden Age, preserved what they could, translating Greek texts into Arabic, but vast swaths of knowledge slipped away. Imagine if we had Euclid's lost works on optics, or Eratosthenes' detailed maps. Our understanding of history, science, and culture would be richer. The loss wasn't just academic, it was personal. Think of a scholar in Alexandria, spending years studying a scroll only for it to vanish in a riot or fire. That human effort, that passion for discovery, dissolved with the library. Today, archaeologists and historians still hunt for clues, hoping to unearth a forgotten cache of scrolls, perhaps preserved in a desert jar, like the Dead Sea Scrolls. But the odds are slim. This gap in our knowledge leaves us wondering, what could we have learned? How much further could humanity have progressed with those texts intact? The library's fall wasn't just a building's end. It was a fracture in our intellectual heritage. In the next chapter, we'll dive into how the library's legacy lived on, inspiring new centers of learning despite its loss. Chapter 8. Echoes of Alexandria in a New Age. The Library of Alexandria may have crumbled, but its spirit didn't die quietly. Its legacy rippled across centuries, inspiring new centers of learning and shaping how we chase knowledge today. Even as its scrolls turned to ash or dust, the idea of a universal library, a place where all human thought could converge, lived on, sparking efforts to rebuild what was lost. Let's explore how Alexandria's dream endured, from medieval scriptoriums to modern archives, and why it still captivates us after the library's decline. Its influence spread through the scholars and texts that survived in the Byzantine Empire. Places like Constantinople became sanctuaries for Greek manuscripts. Monks and scribes painstakingly copied fragments of Alexandrian works, preserving bits of Euclid's geometry or Galen's medical theories. For example, Ptolemy's Almagest, a cornerstone of astronomy, survived because of these efforts, guiding stargazers for centuries. But it wasn't just the Greeks who kept the flame alive. By the 8th century, the Islamic Golden Age took up the torch. In Baghdad's House of Wisdom, scholars translated Greek, Persian, and Indian texts into Arabic, building on Alexandria's cross-cultural model. Mathematicians like Alcunrasent, whose work gave us algebra, owed a debt to the libraries, a tradition of blending knowledge from diverse sources. These translations later reached Europe, fueling the Renaissance. The library's organizational genius also left a mark. The Pinax, that massive catalog by Callimachus, inspired later systems for sorting knowledge. Medieval libraries, though smaller, mimicked this idea, categorizing manuscripts by subject to make them accessible. Fast forward to today, and you see Alexandria's echo in our digital databases. Think of Google or Wikipedia, tools striving to organize the world's information, just as the Pinax did 2,000 years ago. Even the physical act of preserving texts owes something to Alexandria. The shift from fragile papyrus to more durable parchment in later centuries was a lesson learned from the library's struggles with decay. But the legacy wasn't just practical, it was emotional. The idea of a single place holding all human knowledge became a kind of myth, a lost Eden for scholars. During the Renaissance, figures like Erasmus dreamed of recreating Alexandria's universal library, driving the creation of great collections like the Vatican Library. In the 19th century, historians and archaeologists began romanticizing Alexandria, imagining it as a golden age of learning. This inspired modern projects, like the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, opened in 2002 in Egypt, built near the original site. It aims to revive the library's mission, housing millions of books and digital archives. Yet, even this grand effort can't replace what was lost. Just think of the countless plays, histories, or scientific theories we'll never read. Why does this matter to us? Alexandria's story reminds us how fragile knowledge is. Single fire, a war, or neglect can erase centuries of human effort. It's a call to action. Preserve what we have, whether it's digitizing ancient manuscripts or supporting open access research. Imagine if we lost the internet's archives tomorrow, how much would vanish? The library's ghost pushes us to protect our own knowledge hubs. From university libraries to cloud servers, this legacy also shows the power of collaboration. Alexandria thrived because it welcomed ideas from everywhere: Greek, Egyptian, Indian, Jewish. Today, when we share research globally or crowdsource solutions online, we're channeling that same spirit. But the story isn't over. The dream of a universal library still drives us, and in the next chapter, we'll uncover how myths about Alexandria's fall have shaped our view of history itself. Chapter 9. The Myth-Making of Alexandria's Fall, the Library. of Alexandria's collapse wasn't just a loss of scrolls, it became a canvas for storytelling, where history and legend blurred into powerful myths. These tales, spun over centuries, shaped how we view the library and its destruction, turning it into a symbol of lost knowledge and human folly. Let's unravel how these narratives were born, why they persist, and what they reveal about our relationship with the past, diving deep into the stories that keep Alexandria alive in our imagination. The library's fall is shrouded in half-truths, each shaped by the agendas of those who told them. One of the most enduring myths points to Julius Caesar's fire in 48 BCE. Ancient writers like Plutarch and Seneca claimed his harbor skirmish accidentally burned part of the library's collection. Later storytellers exaggerated this into a catastrophic blaze, painting Caesar as the villain who torched the world's knowledge. But evidence suggests the damage was limited, perhaps a warehouse of scrolls, not the main library. Why the exaggeration? For some, it was a way to critique Roman imperialism, casting it as barbaric compared to Alexandria's enlightened culture. Others used it to dramatize the fragility of wisdom, a warning for future generations. Another legend blames the Muslim conquest in 642 CEA's story. Popularized centuries later, claims Caliph Omar ordered the library's books burned, declaring they were either redundant or contrary to Islamic teachings. This tale, found in 13th century accounts like Ibn al-Kiftis, is almost certainly fiction. No contemporary sources mention it, and the library was likely long gone by then. So why did this myth take root? It served medieval Christian and Jewish scholars who wanted to portray Islamic conquests as destructive, a narrative that fueled cultural rivalries. Meanwhile, Islamic scholars of the time were busy preserving Greek texts, not burning them as seen in Baghdad's House of Wisdom. The story was less about truth and more about scoring political points. The Christian destruction of the Serapeum in 391 CE is another flashpoint. When Theodosius I outlawed pagan practices, zealots razed this temple, which housed some of the library's scrolls. Later accounts, especially from Enlightenment thinkers like Edward Gibbon, inflated this into the library's total destruction, blaming Christian fanaticism for snuffing out reason. This fit neatly into 18th century debates about religion versus science, but it oversimplified reality. The Serapeum was a minor site, and the main library had been declining for centuries. These stories, though, stuck because they tapped into deep fears, ignorance triumphing over knowledge, fanaticism over reason. Why do these myths matter? They're not just old gossip, they shape how we see history. The idea of a single, dramatic end to the library is more gripping than the truth, a slow decline from neglect, war, and shifting priorities. These tales turn Alexandria into a cautionary tale, warning us about the dangers of losing our intellectual heritage. They also reflect who we blame for societal decline, whether it's barbarian invaders, religious zealots, or careless rulers. Each retelling reveals more about the teller's era than the library itself. For example, during the Enlightenment, scholars used Alexandria's fall to critique organized religion, while modern writers often frame it as a lesson in preserving cultural treasures. These myths also inspire. The image of a lost golden age drives efforts like the modern Bibliotheca Alexandrina or digital archives like Project Muse, which aim to centralize knowledge. They remind us to value libraries, museums, and even the internet as fragile guardians of human thought. Imagine if we lost access to our digital archives today, Wikipedia, JSTOR, or even social media posts. The panic would echo the grief over Alexandria. The myths push us to ask, how do we protect what we know? How do we ensure ideas survive wars, politics, or time? But the myths also obscure. By focusing on dramatic villains, we overlook the mundane culprits, underfunding, apathy, and entropy. The library didn't need a single fire to die. It needed only neglect. This is a practical lesson for us supporting education, preserving archives, and fostering open inquiry isn't glamorous, but it's vital. Think of local libraries struggling with budget cuts or digital platforms paywalling knowledge. Are modern echoes of Alexandria's fate? The library's story? real and imagined, still burns bright. It's a reminder that knowledge is a flame brilliant, fragile, and worth protecting. In the final chapter, we'll reflect on what Alexandria teaches us today and how its dream continues to shape our future. Chapter 10. Alexandria's Enduring Lesson 4. Our World, the Library of Alexandria. Once the radiant heart of human knowledge is long gone, its shelves of scrolls reduced to whispers in history, yet its story woven from triumphs, tragedies, and myths lives on. Not just as a tale of loss, but as a powerful call to action for our time. In this final chapter, we'll dive deep into what really happened to the library, uncover the full scope of its lost treasures, and explore how its legacy challenges us to protect knowledge today. From ancient scribes to modern digital archives, Alexandria's dream endures, urging us to safeguard humanity's intellectual heritage. Let's reveal the final pieces of this untold story and what they mean for our world in 2025. So what truly ended the Library of Alexandria? It wasn't one dramatic blaze, as legends often claim, but a slow, relentless decline over centuries. By the 7th century CE, when Arab forces entered Alexandria, the library was likely a hollow shell of its former glory. Its main collection, once possibly holding 700,000 scrolls, had been chipped away by multiple blows. Julius Caesar's naval fire in 48 BCE likely burned a storage site of scrolls. Not the main library, but the loss was relenient. Sources like Plutarch estimate thousands of texts destroyed. In 272 CE, Emperor Aurelian's campaign against Queen Zenobia's rebellion damaged parts of the Musam complex. Where the library stood, scattering more scrolls to looters or ruin. The destruction of the Serapeum Temple in 391 CE under Theodosius I's anti-pagan decrees targeted a smaller daughter library, but its demolition by Christian zealots further eroded the collection. These events, though, were just punctuation marks in a longer story of decay. Maintaining papyrus scrolls demanded constant recopying by skilled scribes, a costly effort that waned as Roman Egypt grappled with economic crises, barbarian invasions, and internal strife. By the 4th century, funding for scholars and preservation had plummeted, leaving texts to rot in Alexandria's humid air. Religious tensions between pagans, Christians, and Jews shifted the city's focus from open inquiry to doctrinal battles, sidelining the library's inclusive ethos. The famous tale of Caliph Omar ordering a mass book burning in 642 CE, often blamed for the library's end, is almost certainly a myth. No contemporary records support it, and by then, the library was likely long defunct, its remaining scrolls scattered or decayed. The scope of what vanished is heart-wrenching. Imagine shelves packed with works we'll never read. Over 100 plays by Sophocles, only 7 of which survive today, each a window into human emotion and conflict. Aeschylus, another tragic poet, wrote over 90 plays, but we have just a handful. Scientific texts were hit hard to think of Hero of Alexandria, whose sketches of steam-powered devices and automatons could have rewritten technological history. Ctesibius, who invented water clocks and hydraulic systems, likely left detailed notes that could have advanced engineering centuries earlier. Aristarchus' heliocentric theories, proposing Earth orbited the Sun, might have included calculations that would stun modern astronomers. Beyond Greek works, the library held translations from distant lands, Persian chronicles, Indian mathematical treatises, Egyptian star charts, and even early Buddhist texts. The Septuagint, a Greek translation of Hebrew scriptures, was crafted here, bridging cultures. The Pinax Callimachus catalog of the library's holdings was a masterpiece in itself, organizing knowledge by author and subject, a precursor to modern library systems. Losing it was like losing the internet's search engine overnight. Most of these works were on papyrus, fragile and prone to mold or crumbling. Without constant care, they disintegrated, and with Alexandria scholars dispersed or underfunded, the chain of preservation broke. Why does this loss hit so hard? It's not just the texts, it's what they represented. The library was a bold experiment in universal knowledge, a place where a Greek mathematician could debate an Egyptian priest or study an Indian astronomer's work. This cross-pollination drove breakthroughs. Eratosthenes measured Earth's circumference using shadows. Aristophanes mapped the nervous system through dissections, and Euclid's geometry became a foundation for science. Losing these works delayed progress. Medieval doctors, lacking Aristophanes' anatomical guides, fumbled through trial and error. Renaissance scholars like Copernicus had to rediscover ideas Aristarchus likely outlined 1,800 years earlier. The absence of these texts created gaps. In philosophy, science, literature, and culture gaps were still filling. Some fragments survived, copied by Byzantine monks or translated by Islamic scholars in Baghdad's House of Wisdom. For instance, Ptolemy's Almagest guided astronomers for centuries, and Al-Khwarizmi's algebra built on Greek foundations. But these are drops in a bucket. Most of the library's riches are gone forever. Alexandria's legacy, though, is alive and vibrant. Its model of gathering and organizing knowledge inspired medieval monasteries, where scribes preserved what they could. The Renaissance saw scholars like Erasmus chase the library's dream, building collections like the Vatican Library. Today, the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, opened in 2002 near the original site, houses millions of books and digital archives, echoing its ancestors' mission. Digital platforms, Google, Wikipedia, Project Musar, modern heirs, striving to centralize global knowledge. Even the way we categorize data, from library databases to search algorithms, owes a debt to the pioneers. But the library's fall carries a warning. Knowledge is fragile. A single war, budget cut, or natural disaster can erase centuries of work. Think of modern parallels libraries closing due to funding shortages. Digital archives behind paywalls or data lost to cyber attacks. In 2025, as we rely on cloud servers and AI to store knowledge, we face new risks. What if a solar flare wipes our digital records?
Alexandria's
Urges us to support open access research, digitize rare manuscripts, fund libraries, and teach critical thinking to keep ideas alive. The myths of Alexandria's End Caesar's fire. Omar's bonfire. Christian mobs persist because they're compelling stories. They cast villains we love to hate, but they oversimplify. Real culprits were mundane, apathy, underfunding, and time's relentless march. These are threats we face today. Every time a museum struggles, a university cuts humanities programs, or a community loses its library, we risk repeating Alexandria's fate. The library's dream a place where all knowledge meets. Accessible to all lives in our universities, internet archives, and public libraries. But it's up to us to protect them. Imagine a future where your favorite research database vanishes or a local archive shuts down. What would you do to save it? Alexandria's lesson is clear. Knowledge isn't just power, it's a legacy we must guard with fierce dedication. And that's the untold story of the Library of Alexandria. Just a tale of loss, but a challenge to build, preserve, and share knowledge in our time. If this journey through history moved you, hit that like button. Subscribe for more deep dives into the past and drop a comment below. What lost work from Alexandria would you most want to read? Stay curious and let's keep the flame of learning burning.